Could you introduce yourself and say where we are?
Sure, my name is Dr. Jak Beula. I'm the CEO of Nubian Jack, which is a charity, and what we do is we put up plaques and statues around the country to black people specifically, but to people who celebrate black history in particular.
And whose plaque did you put up today?
So today we peace and love. Let me stop my interview. What?
Well, my name's Murray Cadet, and we're in Brixton. And today I've been commissioned by Nubian Jack.
How many of these plaques have you personally put up?
Personally, we've done 60 on it, Jack. We've done 6. This is the 60. This is the 68, and I've probably put up about 40 of them. The plaque, if you ask me, is to kind of like stamp. This is where we stand. You understand? This is what we've done. You with me? And it's recorded now. It's recorded.
It means a lot to me because we are bringing into the national attention, making the public aware of somebody who served the black community with distinction and was unapologetic.
A memory of Darcus. He attended my father's funeral.
You said 150 people came out today.
150, just 150 people, which is really good. And if we had better weather, we probably would have tripled that. We'd probably hit 500. So that's the pull, the attraction this man has. You understand?
And today, freezing. We're here chattering, raining.
It was raining. So here's a mystical thing, right? I've done 68 plaques, it's rained twice, right, brother? And my soundman said to me, I swear to Jah, my soundman said to me, talk to God now, in a joking way, right? And I said, I can't talk to, and at 12 o'clock, the start, we actually started about 5 past, 10 past. At 12 o'clock, the rain just stopped. That shows you that, you understand, there's some, something special that you can't play with. I could joke about, but when it comes to the higher order and the blessings and the supernatural assistance, as well as my team, I'm just humble, man.
Leighton Rhett Radford Howe, better known as Darcus, was born the 26th of February 1943 in Maruga, Trinidad. He was a broadcaster, writer, and racial justice campaigner. On January 4th, 2022, nearing 5 years after his death, Darcus Howe's legacy was honoured with the placing of a Nubian Jack plaque above the former office of Race Today, a political magazine for which he was the first editor. The plaque is meant to be a signpost for anyone walking down Rolton Road in Brixton to see it and ask themselves, who is Darcus Howe?
Welcome to the History Hotline, a direct line to a better understanding of all things Black history and beyond. And on the line today...
My name is Leila Hassan Howe. I'm the widow of Darcus Howe and a member of the Race Today collective. And we're in the building which housed the collective from 1974 to 1988. I think I would want people to know that Darcus, foremost out of anything else, was a radical revolutionary person. Darcus did not want status within British society. He did believe that in order to have that if black people were really to get equal rights and justice, there would have to be societal change, that it can't be done within the existing society. And that, of course, was inspired by his great uncle, CLR James.
As Leila said, Darcus's work and legacy is closely linked and heavily inspired by the great Trinidadian writer, historian, and Marxist icon, Cyril Lionel Robert James, or CLR James to the rest of us. To fully contextualise the life and work of Darcus, we must know and understand the theories of his mentor and great uncle. But it is no easy task of condensing the beliefs and writings of a man who wrote across genre, discipline, nation, and time. His work spans the historical memory of the Haitian Revolution in the Black Jacobins, his political autobiography and cricket-heavy memoir, Beyond the Boundary, as well as numerous essays, speeches and interviews inextricably linking the Caribbean to Europe, Africa, and the wider Americas, consistently reminding us of the historical and present realities of race and class exploitation in his native West Indies. There's no better place to go than to the Caribbean, with Associate Professor of Political Science, well versed in the many verses of CLR James, Dr. Tennyson Joseph.
Okay, my name is Tennyson Joseph, and I'm the author of the book CLR James in the 21st Century Caribbean. I said I'm a St. Lucian by nationality, although I am a global citizen by consciousness. I am currently associate professor at North Carolina Central University, but I traverse between being in the USA and the Caribbean.
We asked Dr. Joseph how he would describe CLR James to a young Londoner who'd never read or heard about him before.
Think of a kind of Caribbean person, grew up in the Caribbean, read a lot of books, and he only went to Europe at age 30. He first went to Europe around age 34. So he basically is going to Europe as a grown man. And within 5 years, and that's not the most, he was recognized as one of the world's leading Marxist theoreticians. Can you imagine? So so that is my 2 minutes of James. In other words, think of somebody becoming the world's best at something after having grown up in the Caribbean when nobody knew him, really outside the Caribbean, and within 3 to 5 years, reaching the UK and being recognized as one of the world's best anything. So, and now I know my 2 minutes are up, but the Caribbean has produced many of the world's best many things. Let me give an example. So Marcus Garvey, same background as CLR James, country boy, and goes to the USA and forms an organization called the UNIA, which is even today the biggest black organization ever organized. Now, let's go again. Bob Marley, a country boy from Jamaica, becomes still today one of the world's leading, let's call him musicians. So his Exodus album is one of the best ever, with the movie on him just came out. And so now I take it to the contemporary thing, Rihanna, a Barbadian schoolgirl, no longer than the 16 or 17-year-old that we are trying to talk to. And she is now within let's say 10 years, one of the world's leading superstars. And that is just, I only give you music and I give you somebody from the literary world. I haven't mentioned footballers and I haven't mentioned cricketers. Now, to the 17-year-old young person, black, and who thinks that the world is overwhelming, remember that your very smallness can propel you into greatness.
How would you describe James's impact on the generation of thinkers and activists after him?
He had a big impact. Remember, he had study circles, so Darcus Howe, Walter Rodney. There were many people who speak to tell you that they sat at the feet of James during his London years. Many like Robert Hill, many people, and not just in the England, in Canada, there's another circle of people that you can actually trace to James. And then when you come to the Caribbean during his Trinidad years, a lot of people in the oil field workers trade union, a current generation, people like David Abdullah and them, they might not have understood his relevance the way I'm trying to explain it now, but he did impact a lot of people. The New Beginning movement in Trinidad and so forth, all of these people were impacted. John LaRose and them in England were impacted by James.
How would you describe James's basic ideology to somebody who's never read or heard of James?
Right. So, good question. So, he wrote on so many things. So, what I was trying to do in the book, and I'm going to answer your question in that roundabout way. I apologize for that. Because he wrote on so many things, what I found in the present period is that everybody would have their own James. There's a writer called Anthony Mingo who said that in the contemporary period, everybody can pick and choose their own CLR James. So you have some people, everybody in the contemporary say this is who James was. So if you have 1,000 people, you have 1,000 different Jameses, and all of them are kind of opportunistically saying who they're saying James is more a reflection of who they are. So everybody using James to justify their own position. So just to give a classic example, I came across a number of writers who were using James to argue for postmodernism. So, because James wrote in the Black Jacobins, he had a famous line about agency versus structure. Marx had a famous notion about men make history, but they do not make history in condition of their own choosing. So that line by Marx suggests that individuals can bring their own agency. So James had written a line about Toussaint Louverture in the Haitian Revolution about whether the revolution made Toussaint or Toussaint made the revolution. And would you believe that there are whole journal articles written on that, just that singular line saying that James was arguing for postmodernism. So when I wrote my book, what I tried to do is to anchor James back in his Marxism. And that's my answer to your question. James was a Marxist. What is the essential philosophy of James is that James took the Hegelian dialectic, the Marxist dialectic, and he applied it himself to the conditions that he saw in the late 20th century. So the essence of James is that. So James did not just take Marx and repeat Marx. He said Marx wrote at a particular time. Marx wrote at a time when capitalism was just starting. Lenin wrote about Marxism, used the dialectic to argue for a particular model of revolution in Russia. And he's saying that I CLR James. Now, it might sound very boastful because people say Trinidadians are very boastful. But he said, I CLR James now is saying to you that what Lenin wrote about on the Soviet Union, what Lenin wrote in relation to the Vanguard Party, that no longer holds. And the world has changed to a certain extent where a new dialectic can explain a new man, a new working class. And that's what he did. So that is his essence. The essence of James is that he used the Marxist dialectic and applied it beyond Marx, beyond Lenin, to the working class. He described the working class in relation to technology, the world of late 20th century. And he said, let's say, for example, where Stalinism emerged with a kind of centralist figure, making authoritarian decisions and imposing them on people, which is what the Soviet Union was. James was arguing from early 1920s, late 1920s, that this will collapse because the human being that in one historical period, one man or group of men could impose things on, no longer exists. So if you take something like technology alone, just think, Wayland, something like technology by itself, the way you would drive a slave or an enslaved person in the 1800s and 1700s, you cannot drive a human being in that way. You can't tell people how to think or how to act or how to respond. So he was describing that kind of tendency, which we now take for granted, which is a kind of what we call it. What he used to call, he used a phrase called free creative activity to explain what he said was why the Soviet Union was going to collapse. He was saying that you cannot impose that thing which Lenin described, mind you, he wasn't criticizing Lenin. He said what Lenin did was to devise a particular tool to make a revolution in early 20th century Russia. And he was saying, if you want to freeze that category, what Lenin did in early 20th century Russia, if you want to take that same model and apply it to parts of the world, like that's why he was very critical of the Grenada Revolution. Imagine the guys in Grenada are taking a Leninist model. There was a peasantry in Russia. There was a czar. There was an old monarchy called a czar in Russia in the early 1900s. And you're taking that and you want to impose that same model on a Caribbean country in the late 20th century. So James was saying, so that was the essence of James's work. So he gave us a method. So in the book, I spent a lot of time describing the Jamesian dialectical method. Some of what I'm saying to you now, I was saying so in the book, showing you how he updated the thing from Marx from Lenin to what he was saying in the 20th century. So what I try to do in the book is to say, this is how James described it, and these are the things we are seeing in the Caribbean and the world today, which makes it very relevant for. So that in essence is James's political philosophy.
Hey Diana, it's Waylon. I know you're probably doing your thesis or teaching or research and something. Just let you know, I'm on my way to the Content is Queen studio. I'm going to interview one of Darcus's biographers. Thank you for sending the questions through. I'll let you know how it goes. Peace.
love the microphone, by the way. I feel it looks like a lightsaber.
Yeah, I was playing Star Wars Battlefront 2 this morning.
Oh, there you go.
Could you start by introducing yourself?
Hello, I'm Robin. I'm a historian of political thought. I'm based at Cambridge University, and I recently co-wrote a book about Darcus Howe and a book about Diane Abbott. My first recollection of Darcus is seeing him on the telly in the 90s. So I was always somebody who was interested in interesting people, and I was interested specifically in intelligent people who talked intelligently about politics. And in the 80s and in the early 90s, there was not a lot of that around. So when I saw this incredible guy on the television, really, who really knew his stuff and was able to convey really complex ideas really simply, in a really engaging way. So I was hooked. So seeing Darcus on television, I thought, here's somebody with something really interesting to say, and with, just a real, he was obviously an intellectual, and that appealed to me. Darcus was one of the leading figures in the British Black Power movement. And then having been a kind of grassroots radical in the 70s, he took on the editorship of Race Today, which was the campaigning journal for Black rights and Black liberation in the 70s and 80s. And having established himself as a really powerful journalist, he went on to be a very influential television presenter who tackled all kinds of issues that mainstream media really didn't want to talk about.
So what was the process leading up to you and Paul Field writing Darcus's biography?
Good question. So there were a number of things which led to it. First of all, I was writing a book about Black power in America. And as I was doing the research on this book, I thought there were so many parallels between what I was reading about what was going on in America and the things I knew about Darcus. So in terms of campaigns against the police, and specifically the way that Darcus framed his campaigns. So I just immediately knew that there was a story there. So I just Googled Darcus Howe biography, and I thought there'd be a lefty one, probably written by, some radical, and there'd probably be an academic one written, more mainstream. So I assumed there would be these two biographies out there, and I thought, well, I'll read both of them, and that'll be really fascinating. There was nothing, no biographies of Darcus, and that struck me as weird, because I thought, here's this really important person who's been doing these incredible campaigns. Surely there must be a biography. So that kind of got me thinking. Secondly, I learned, to my horror, that Darcus had been diagnosed with cancer. So I thought, oh my goodness, now has to be the time to write the book. Thankfully, the cancer was treated very effectively, and it didn't kill him, which very grateful for. And finally, I guess I was just aware he was in London somewhere. I wasn't quite sure where he was in London, so I was based in London. In all of his documentaries, he's always walking around London. So I kind of got the impression that he was a person who you could reach out to. So I reached out to him through the New Statesman. He did a regular column in the New Statesman for, I think, 12 or 13 years. I sent out the email at 11 o'clock one morning. I thought I'll probably hear from him in 2 or 3 weeks, maybe a month. Sent out the email at 11. I got an email back from him at 1 o'clock saying, "Dear Robin, please can you contact me on this number to discuss our project?" Darcus had a reputation for, speaking the truth with confidence, and he was clearly not out to make friends. Okay, so he could have quite an abrasive style. So when I met him, I was extraordinarily nervous. Okay. Because I'd seen the way he took on people on television and, made mincemeat out of them. So I was, obviously I was a bit worried about that. And he was initially a bit wary. So for those of you who don't know me, I'm 6'1" and I'm white and I'm bald. I could easily look like a member of the Metropolitan Police in plain clothes, And I think Darcus was a bit concerned that this was some kind of setup because, when I was doing the research, the police were surveilling him the whole time. We got a lot of material declassified from Special Branch who were clearly keeping him under observation for some time. So it wasn't a silly suspicion of his. So first of all, he's like, well, is this some kind of sting operation? Secondly, why on earth, I've never heard of you. You've been writing about the 17th century. Why are you all of a sudden interested in the 20th century? So initially, he had his concerns and they were legitimate. And the kind of breakthrough came in very sad circumstances. One of Darcus's very close friends, Frank Critchlow, who ran the Mangrove Restaurant, died. And Paul and I wrote an obituary of Frank in The Independent. And when Darcus read that, he said, oh, okay, I now see that you're on our side. I now see that, you respect what we're doing, and I'm now happy to work with you. Darcus grew up in Trinidad, and his parents were both teachers. His mum was a primary school teacher and his dad was a secondary school teacher. And I get the impression that education was absolutely central and crucial to their view of the world and to their view of what Darcus needed to do. And this education kind of went hand in hand with kind of like an intellectual education, but also with a moral education. So his father was a priest. So Darcus's dad was a very authoritative character. He was the local priest and also the local headmaster. So, in both settings, whether you're on a Sunday morning or Monday to Friday, he's the authority figure. And from his parents, he gets a love of learning and a kind of real moral authority. And the moral authority doesn't just come from his dad. His mum was really important in terms of framing his moral understanding of the world. But at the same time, a part of his dad's moral understanding is the importance of Black people taking control of the institutions they're in. So his dad was known retrospectively as a kind of Black power priest. So he was very committed to Black men, sadly not Black women, but very committed to Black men being in the priesthood and Black men running the churches in Black communities. The other thing I'd say about Darcus's upbringing is that because he grew up in Trinidad and because there's a large African community in Trinidad and there's also a large Asian community in Trinidad, Darcus really understood the importance of African and Asian unity from an early age. And his dad really stressed the moral evil of racism towards Asian people. And racism towards Black people as well, of course. But really stressed the importance of, the absolute moral evil of racism towards Asian people. So Darcus always saw himself as somebody who had solidarity with the Asian working class as well as with the Black working class. I guess the final thing I'd say about Darcus's upbringing is that he's a funny mix of two apparently contradictory things. So on the one hand, Darcus gets a scholarship to Queen's Royal College, which is like the Eton or the Harrow of Trinidad. It's modelled, I believe, on Dulwich College in London. So he goes to this incredibly elite school where he learns, a very elite curriculum, comes out with some excellent grades. So on the one hand, he's very, very at home in that environment. And on the other hand, at the weekends, he's running around with the Renegades. And the Renegades are a steel pan band. But there's also a kind of criminal element to that. And Darcus is at home in that world too.
What could you tell me about Darcus's relation to CLR James and how that impacts his life?
It's extraordinarily important to him. When he's in Trinidad, he's aware that he's got this famous uncle. Well, I think they're technically cousins, but he's aware there's this famous member of the family. But also, CLR James he's a radical. So he's famous, but he's slightly disreputable. So the family doesn't quite know what to do with him or, quite where to, place him. But it's only really when Darcus gets to the UK that he starts spending time with CLR James. And that's really, really important to Darcus's understanding of what politics should be and the importance of the Black working class and the Black lumpen proletariat. And the thing that Darcus says about CLR James is that James kept his eye on the ball. Darcus didn't go to university ultimately. There was a plan that he was going to go to York to study philosophy. And I can't quite remember the details, but maybe he's there for like a week or a month or something and then drops out. But he kind of says he went to the University of CLR James. And he had this metaphor that, he said to me, I did my postgrad with Nello. Okay. And I think it's a really useful metaphor because the thing about a postgrad is that neither you, the student, nor the supervisor are in full command of this area. You're breaking new ground. You're constantly breaking new ground. And therefore, the relationship at a postgrad level between the student and the teacher is much more egalitarian, much more open-ended. And I think that's the thing about CLR James. And I think during CLR James's life, things move, don't they? Things move. There is a time where CLR James is the expert and CLR James is, the big name. And then as we go through the 80s and Darcus's career really takes off in television, Darcus is the big name. And CLR James, unfortunately, he's getting older, he's getting weaker. And Darcus becomes, the person who's making sure CLR is okay, looking after him, making, to some extent a gatekeeper, making sure, because there are lots of people who want to spend time with CLR James, and CLR James obviously, he's an old man at this point, and he hasn't got all the energy in the world. And if you hear Darcus's speech at CLR's funeral, you'll hear the way that Darcus, the way that there's this interplay between CLR James is bringing a lot to the table, but Darcus is bringing a lot to the table too.
What does this plaque mean to you?
So for me, it's really the first public acknowledgement in a physical space of Darcus's contribution to the black community in Britain and to British politics. Part of what I said today is Darcus is becoming an icon. People are talking about Darcus as this great black leader, you can't fault it. It's what's happened to Malcolm X. But what they don't really take into account is what the struggle was that they were doing, what the struggle was for, and what they wanted to achieve in that struggle, which wasn't just to be a famous great black person. So I'm hoping that when people look into Darcus and Darcus's life, they delve much more into his thoughts, his politics, his writings and his ideas.
And that exactly is our hope for the rest of this mini-series. Darcus Howe left behind a vast catalogue of writing, broadcast interviews and political work, all of which allow us to critically analyse the world around us, as he so did. We will also be playing devil's advocate and turning that same critical lens on Darcus and the legacy he left behind.
How's this for racist stereotyping? Darcus Howe, the black rights activist turned television presenter, is a typical West Indian male. He's promiscuous, having sired 5 children by 3 different women. He is so sexist he's hardly washed a plate since he set up house with his second wife nearly 20 years ago, and he has a propensity to violence. I, of course, would not dream of saying these are West Indian characteristics. Darcus Howe, however, would, and does.
That's it for another episode of the History Hotline. If you enjoyed it, please rate and review us on whatever podcast platform you listen to, or tell a friend to tell a friend. To continue the conversation, follow us on social media at The History Hotline on Instagram and at The History HL on Twitter. The History Hotline is hosted by me, Deanna Lynn Cook. Production by Waylon Mackenzie Witter.
And featuring The Journey, an original composition by Kyra Nickel. The History Hotline theme song that you're hearing now.
Provided by Royal Sounds. The History Hotline.